order, and I would like to begin by welcoming Secretary Vilsack. Joining the Secretary is Mr. Chris Nelson, Associate Budget Director for the Department of Agriculture. We welcome you both here today, and there is no doubt that fiscal year 2024 presented us with many challenges. We had to make some tough decisions, but I made sure we maintained our support for USDA's vital programs that support American families, farmers, and producers in rural communities. I'm not going to sugarcoat things. Fiscal year 2025 will come with its own set of complications that we must navigate together, Mr. Secretary. While we are under austere spending constraints, this subcommittee must ensure that USDA has the resources that you need to fulfill your broad and critical mission. The programs and activities of this department affect nearly every American, from farmers and rural communities to children and families who depend on programs like WIC and SNAP to put healthy and nutritious food on the table. The President's budget request for USDA totals $25.1 billion, which is an increase of $2 billion. I am pleased that this budget request maintains our focus on providing tools to producers in rural communities to become part of our overall effort to solve climate change. Of particular importance to me is supporting our conservation programs to help producers be good stewards of our land. We know these programs are vital to managing lands and combating climate change. While the fiscal year 2024 budget bill did not provide all of the funding for conservation that I would have liked, I am pleased to see the budget restore these important programs, and I will certainly do everything I can to ensure that conservation is a priority in the fiscal year 2025 bill. And it calls for increased research and management of PFAS contamination in the agriculture sector, which has impacted many farmers in my home state of New Mexico. I look forward to discussing these initiatives and how this subcommittee can play a role in this critical issue. We also know that affordable housing has become a major challenge, especially in rural areas. This budget includes needed increases and innovative policy proposals to grow our affordable housing stock in rural communities. This is absolutely essential if we want to ensure that all Americans can access a safe and affordable place to call home. Another issue of great importance to both of us is ensuring all of our children can receive healthy and nutritious food. Without this, our children cannot learn effectively or thrive. I'm proud we were able to fully fund WIC last year and continue the fruit and vegetable voucher. This will continue to be a priority of mine as we start this fiscal year 2025 process. It's clear that USDA has many ambitious goals, and I look forward to a robust discussion today. And I want to reiterate my support for drafting a bipartisan bill this year and look forward to working with the ranking member and all the members of this committee. And with that, I'll turn to our ranking member, Senator Hoeven, for any statement that he has this morning.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks for your work, and also was pleased that we were able to move our appropriations bill for 24 across the finish line, albeit 6 months late. But again, I think it was a good work product, and I appreciate working with you on it. And obviously, we're already into 25 as we need to be. But it's important we get it done, and I sure hope we can get it done, closer to on time. But very important that we do get it done, and that takes a lot of bipartisan work. Secretary, thank you for being here today. Thank you for your work, for many years on behalf of agriculture. It's incredibly important, and as they say now, more important than ever. Appreciate you being here today. Every single American benefits every single day from good farm policy. And think about it. And we need to talk about it because so many folks now don't have that nexus to the farm that they once had. Some of us come, out of a ag background. Some of us are still involved. As a matter of fact, we have two cattle ranchers on our panel here. So they not only know it, they live it. But certainly Jerry and I come from farm country, Kansas and North Dakota, as do you, Iowa. But a lot of people figure food comes from the grocery store, and they don't have that nexus to our farmers and ranchers that so many of us once had. And so it's really important that they understand that when we talk about these farm programs, we're talking about keeping a network of about 16 million people involved in agriculture across this country, both directly and indirectly, a system that is primarily family farms and ranches. And when you look at so many industries that have developed this industry concentration, to have that network is incredibly important in and of itself, but then think of what it means for every single American. Highest quality, lowest cost food supply in the world, with Americans spending less of their disposable income on their food budget than any other developed country in the world. Good grief, we can't take that for granted. And I know you know that, Mr. Secretary, and that's why it's so important that as we talk about all these programs that are in the Farm Bill, that we are very mindful of the programs that create that highest quality, lowest cost food supply, because it benefits all these other programs. When we talk about the nutrition program, or we talk about any of the other aspects of what has become, you know, the largest part of the Farm Bill, we have to understand that if we don't maintain that system of family farms and ranches, our food, and it's food, fuel, and fiber now, as you well know, those costs are going to rise. That affects every other aspect, not only of all of the SNAP programs and everything else. It's going to cost more to provide them. You won't be able to provide as much if we don't sustain those farm programs that maintain that network of family farms and ranches. It is truly the engine in the car. And so we have to be mindful as we look at this budget. We have to keep that absolutely in mind. And right now, as you know, again, our farmers and ranchers are facing real pressures. They're seeing commodity prices that they go down at the same time that their input costs are going up significantly. When they look at their fuel costs, and of course that fuel cost drives their fertilizer costs and all their other inputs, right? Chemical, spray, everything they do, they're getting squeezed this year. We're seeing a significant reduction in farm income this year, which is why it's so important we maintain these programs. Along that lines, you may have seen that I, along with other members of our Ag Committee, filed the Farmer Act, which is designed to increase support for crop insurance, the #1 risk management tool that our farmers and ranchers have. Also, the ag research. I mean, it's just critically important. Not only NIFA, the industry-based ag research, as well as ARS. And they do a tremendous job. Continuing to support FSA, incredibly important. We've talked about that network out there, and having that face-to-face. You know, they can't do it all. They can do a lot on the internet, but having that face-to-face is incredibly important. And we'll talk about it here today. We're seeing real pressures on this budget in terms of things like WIC and some of these other programs. Increase of more than $1 billion last year. I think a $700 million proposed increase this year. We've got to talk about that a little bit and determine how we're going to handle some of these costs, again, while maintaining that safety net, that countercyclical safety net for our farmers and ranchers. And this great system of agriculture is so diverse. I mean, every state in the country, I think, Bozeman's been on a challenge to find a state, if there is one, that isn't involved in agriculture, because he's going to every single state in the country. And he was up in Alaska, and I said, well, maybe you finally found one up there that doesn't. But there's something about seaweed or kelp or something that they're doing up there. So I think it's safe to say all 50 states have agriculture. With that, again, thanks for being here today. We appreciate it, Mr. Secretary. Thanks, thanks, Chairman.
Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hoeven, and members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here this morning. Each year, the Department of Agriculture puts out a rural development at a glance, an opportunity to take a look at the rural economy and determine how things are going. This year's edition of that report had some positive news. It appears that rural employment is now back to pre-pandemic levels. It appears that the poverty rate is significantly reduced. The unemployment rate is at an historic low in rural America. And in fact, we've actually seen a reduction in the counties that have been characterized as persistently poor. These are counties that have experienced a poverty rate of 20% or more for over 30 years. We had a net reduction of 29 counties out of 260 that have left that characterization. I raise this just simply to put a focus on the importance of investing in the Rural Partnership Network, which is included in our budget. The chairman indicated the importance of housing and making sure that we continue to support our housing programs. And I would also encourage you, as you look at congressionally directed spending in the community facility program, that you do so with an eye on those areas of persistent poverty so that we can continue the momentum that we've seen in the last couple of years. I appreciate Senator Hovind's comments about research. Clearly, we need to continue to look at ways in which we can focus on things like PFAS, HPAI, and some of the other challenges that are faced out in the countryside. I appreciate the opportunity to acquaint the committee with the challenges of our ARS facilities, particularly in Beltsville, the need for significant investment there and improved, and the importance of containing and retaining the flexibility within the CCC in order to allow us to respond to situations that crop up from time to time. Most recent example, fertilizer. We're now in the process of funding at least 42 projects that are helping to tamp down the costs and increase in fertilizer. We should also point out that after 3 years of record farm income, the best farm income that we've had in at least 50 years and maybe ever, we, as Senator Hovind indicated, are seeing income rates that will likely be closer to historic norms. We're also seeing as well an aging nature of our farm population. And I bring to the attention of the committee concerns that I have about the loss of farms and the loss of farmland. In 1981, Secretary Berglund, as he was leaving office, expressed concern about the changes that we had made in the way in which we supported agriculture from a supply management system to a more market orientation. He expressed concerns that this might result in a significant reduction in farms and farmland. He was absolutely right. Since he issued that report, we've lost 544,970 farms. Now, to give you a sense of how many farms that is, that's all the farms that exist today in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado, Missouri, and Oklahoma. We've lost 151 million acres of farmland. That is land that was in farming that is no longer in farming. That is the entire land mass of Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Maryland, and a good part of Virginia. I don't think anybody on this committee, and I don't think anybody in this Congress, in this Senate or the House, or in this federal government believes that that's an appropriate direction for agriculture, which is why we have, for the first time, put together a comprehensive effort to provide support for small and mid-sized farming operations in addition to the extraordinarily important productive agriculture that Senator Hovind alluded to. We're creating opportunities for value-added products through climate-smart agriculture. We're creating the opportunity for farmers to generate additional income by the sale, if you will, of the environmental results that only farmers can obtain because they have the land that can sequester carbon, they have the operations that can reduce greenhouse gas emissions below net zero. They have the opportunity to participate in ecosystem service markets, a new stream of income for farm families. They have the opportunity to convert agricultural waste into a wide variety of bioproducts, most exciting of which is sustainable aviation fuel that I think we're going to see an explosion of over the course of the next several years. Another income source, another commodity, if you will. We have the ability to take renewable energy and not only reduce costs on the farm, but also utilize that renewable energy to create a new revenue stream for farmers as well, as they work with their elected co-op, as they work with local municipal utilities to provide less expensive, renewably produced energy, another commodity, if you will, another income source. And also sponsoring and supporting local and regional food systems, the ability to expand processing capacity owned and operated independently of the large processing facilities. We've done over close to 400 investments in expanded processing opportunities across the United States, additional investments at the state level to shore up the supply chain, to create opportunities for non-meat and poultry processing as well. And the reason we do this is because when you go to the grocery store and you put $1 on the counter, Senator Hovind's absolutely right, It is the less expensive as a percentage of income that we spend on food than anybody else in the world. But the reality is the farmer only gets anywhere from 15 to 20 cents of that dollar. When you sell directly to your customer, as many farmers are beginning to do, they get 50 to 75 cents of every food dollar. So it's an opportunity for us to expand the income base for small and mid-sized farming operations to begin the process of slowing down and ultimately reversing the loss of farms and farm families. I'm excited about this budget because it does contain additional tools at FSA to provide assistance and help to farmers who might be struggling. We're looking at increasing the microloan limit, looking at ways in which we perhaps provide less experience requirements in order to access some of our larger loan programs, increasing the ownership loan limits so that we have access for small and mid-sized producers to expand their operation, more flexibility in the amount of down payment that they may be required to provide, and the way in which it's financed, and more opportunity to provide some degree of relief in the form of debt forgiveness or loan servicing, and allowing a refinancing of debt. I look forward to the questions from this committee, but I think this is a pivotal time. Senator Hoeven mentioned the Farm Bill. Obviously, we are anxious to work with the Congress to get that Farm Bill done, but I think it's going to be important for us to focus, in addition to production agriculture, on agriculture that also benefits and increases income streams for small and mid-sized farmers, because that's important to rural America.
Mr. Secretary, I appreciate your response to my recent letter regarding ready-to-use therapeutic foods. Can you talk a little bit about what more the department can do to provide RUTFs as an option within the food aid toolbox, what authorities you may need, and talk a little bit about the incredible impact that ready-to-use therapeutic foods can have on malnourished children?
I think, Mr. Chairman, the distinction is between trying to address malnutrition as it exists today in an emergency circumstance versus a longer-term commitment to increase food security in nations that are challenged. Our programs are primarily through the Food for Peace program, Progress program, are primarily focused on the latter. USAID's efforts are focused primarily on the former. So we work collaboratively with USAID to ensure that our resources are utilized in a proper way. The use of CCC in this particular circumstance provided us an opportunity to double down on the latter, but because of the nature of the charter, the CCC charter, we were not able to essentially utilize any of those resources for the packets. We are advised that because of what we're doing with the CCC, we're creating greater flexibility within USAID, and I would suspect and anticipate that in the very near future, you're going to see a significant commitment from USAID on the use of those packets. So it's a combination, it's a partnership. I mean, I think you could look at changing the CCC, but I think it's probably better to adequately finance the Food for Peace and Food for Progress programs and encourage USDA and USAID to continue working collaboratively together.
Can you talk a little bit, give us a little bit of an update on implementation of the two bison production-related provisions that were in the FY24 bill related both to inspection fees for processing and then also production and marketing?
As Senator Hoeven pointed out, that bill just passed recently, and so we are in the process of taking a look at trying to better define what a Native American establishment and institution is, so that we know where that resource and that assistance needs to be directed. We are engaged in consultations this week and next week with tribes in an effort to try to discuss self-determination as it relates to processing. And as you know, we are investing resources under the American Rescue Plan in expanded processing capacity. So I think you're going to continue to see us work collaboratively with tribes. I think you're going to continue to see us work in a way that will dovetail and parallel what we do with states, where we basically try, if we can, to pick up roughly 50% of the costs. I think you're going to see that kind of arrangement discussed with the tribes, and hopefully we reach a consensus on steps forward.
Thank you. I was glad to see the Western Water Framework announced by NRCS last year. With this as a foundation to build on, how is USDA planning and a sort of all-of-department approach to tackle the Western drought resilience challenges that we have from large-scale upstream watershed restoration all the way down to small-scale on-the-farm kind of measures?
The Western Water and Working Lands Initiative is an initiative focused on 6 strategies, 13 different ways in which we approach preserving groundwater, surface water, focused on preserving rangeland, pasture land, agricultural productivity, and the tools to do so. In fiscal year 23, we invested $1.9 billion across a variety of programs within USDA. You saw aggressive use of EQIP, CSP, RCPP within the NRCS. You saw research being conducted at ARS as well as grants in NIFA. So it's an extensive effort on our part to try to address and to provide tools for farmers, ranchers, and producers to be able to address concerted issues. And I think we work collaboratively with our partners in the federal government in an interagency effort focused on everything from storage to more conservation and better utilization of the scarce water resources we have.
This will be my last question for you, Mr. Secretary, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague. But we know affordable housing has become just such an enormous challenge across my state and many states across the country. Can you talk a little bit about how USDA is planning to implement the decoupling of rental assistance from the multifamily loan program that was included in the FY24 bill?
First of all, I express appreciation for the Senate and the House providing us this tool. We've identified approximately 1,700 units between this year and next fiscal year that will become available that could potentially be incorporated in that program. I think you'll see roughly 600 units this year and 1,100 units potentially next year, depending upon what decisions you make reference to decoupling. You've instructed us up to 1,000 units. We might suggest maybe going to 1,700.
Great. Fantastic. Senator Hoven.
Secretary, I want to pick up on, the loss of farms concerns me greatly that you referenced. And actually, it's more than I realized. You and I have talked about this before, but you brought it home pretty dramatically in your opening comments. What's most effective, in your opinion, to stem that tide?
I think it's a combination, Senator. I think first and foremost, you obviously have to have a safety net to try to keep people on the farm, which goes to the loan programs, goes to crop insurance and the risk management tools that you know so much about. But I think it's also expanding markets. I think it's important for these small and mid-sized producers not to have a single commodity-based income stream. I think they have to have a stream that's climate-related. I think they have to have a stream that's ecosystem service-related. I think we have to encourage more conversion of agricultural waste into a variety of products instead of over-application in many parts of the country. I think we need to continue to strengthen our local and regional food system because they get a better bang for the buck. I think we need to continue to look at concentration and do what we can to provide more independently owned, maybe farmer-owned processing. So it's a combination of safety net and markets.
So I agree. We work on all those things in Iowa and North Dakota, Kansas, across the country. So I agree with those. In terms of crop insurance, the countercyclical safety net, crop insurance, are there some things that ought to be included in those things as we look at the Farm Bill that you think would go at this problem?
Well, I think we need to continue to look for ways in which we can expand coverage. More products, more crops basically being covered. There's still not everything that's grown and raised in this country has the same level or opportunity. We've had 12 new products and 50 modifications to existing policies. I think we need to do more of that. I think we do need to take, there's a conflicting set of messages coming out of this Capitol on crop insurance. There's some who, in your circumstance, are suggesting an increase in commitment from the federal government so that the farmers have to pay a little bit less for more coverage. Then there's some folks on the House side who are suggesting significant reductions in that safety net. I think we need perhaps some consistency in the approach here. Would be helpful.
Well, we prefer our approach.
Well, I'm sure you do. But there are 166 members of the House Republican caucus that feel that crop insurance should be cut.
It seems to me as we look at this Farm Bill, crop insurance, countercyclical safety net, access to credit, beginning farmer, those kind of programs, some of the livestock programs we actually want to make more consistent, dependable, whether it's livestock forage, livestock indemnity, emergency livestock assistance, where, on the farm side, it's more dependable. These ranchers, particularly the smaller ranchers, the ones starting out, know. I think as we look at the Farm Bill, those things, we have to take into account those numbers that you just laid out and think about our programs and make sure we're getting the job done.
You do, but I think if you only do that,
Not only that, yeah.
if that's all you do, that's halfway.
Right, which is why I asked you we have always had a surplus in ag trade. We have a deficit right now in ag trade. Back to your comment about markets, right?
There's a reason for that.
High dollar for one.
High dollar, strong dollar, no doubt. An economy worldwide that's not as strong as the U.S. economy. However, this is an interesting statistic. Maybe it's just coincidental. Our trade deficit for the first 3 months of fiscal year 24 was $6 billion. Bought $6 billion more than we sold. China purchased $6 billion less.
Yeah, I knew that's where you were going. Yeah, coincidence, no, right?
Well, look, if you continually wrap your number one customer, it's not surprising that your number one customer would send you a signal about, hey, we're paying attention. So what has to happen, I think, is a much more nuanced and sophisticated conversation about China. You mentioned family farms. What's a greater risk, Chinese ownership of farmland or the fact that Wall Street and investment banks own a third of the largest farm operations in the country? 50,000 farms or so owned by investors, not by farm families. Which is a greater risk?
What do we do on the trade front? But again, we need to be tougher on trade. I think there's both trade barriers and non-trade barriers that we've got to knock down. We've got to be tougher there. What do we do here?
I can give you a list of $20 billion of trade wins we've had. They're doubles and singles. They're not home runs, but they are, the cumulative impact and effect is important. The RAP program that we initiated at the request of Senator Bozeman and Senator Stabenow, important because it expands our opportunity to diversify, more people, more presence, more promotion, more opportunities for trade missions. You're going to see that, more emphasis in Africa and Southeast Asia, moving away from the over-reliance on China. I think that's an important consideration.
Okay. Well, I've used my time. I'll come back with some of my other questions in round two. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Fisher. That's what you get for showing up on time.
Well, my colleagues here, I'd love to bump them.
Go right ahead.
Senator Moran followed me in before the gavel.
Senator Moran.
Thank you. Now you owe me, Jerry.
Somehow I didn't come out ahead on this deal. Secretary Vilsack, thank you. My expectation is that I need a couple of rounds for questions, so I'm happy to take this beginning. First of all, I appreciate your leadership in agriculture. I appreciate the relationship we've had for a long time. I want to highlight the importance that I see in the consideration and ultimate passage of a farm bill. I'm disappointed that there's a pause taking place, and it seems to be that there are those in the Senate who believe the current farm bill is satisfactory, meets their needs. I also recognize the challenges that would exist in the House in trying to pass a farm bill as well. So there's plenty of responsibility here that needs to be met. But it's the first time in, I don't know, I've been maybe through 4 farm bills, been on the conference committee for 2 or 3 of them. It's the first time that I've ever seen that we voluntarily decide that we can't get a farm bill done. And you outlined the challenges that producers face. And I don't expect you to respond to this, but I did not want the moment to pass without, again, asking the Senate leadership of the Ag Committee and the leadership of the Senate to reemphasize and refocus on getting a farm bill done. I have a lot of interest in trying to deal with drought and water issues in the farm bill, conservation practices, on the farm income. You predicted, the USDA predicted it would be down 43% in the last 5 years since the last farm bill. Input costs are dramatically rising, have risen, and so I don't want us to walk away from this. Mr. Secretary, about a year ago, we were in Manhattan, Kansas, cut a ribbon on the National Agrobioscience Research Facility. Its importance becomes is more evident all the time. Would you update me and the committee on the transition activities and the mission transfer from Plum Island to Manhattan?
The official transfer from the Department of Homeland Security to USDA has occurred, and we're in the process now of, as you say, moving select agents and other matters from Plum Island to Manhattan, Kansas. We're doing this in a very thoughtful, very careful, and very systematic way. I'm pleased with the progress that we've made so far. I anticipate more progress being made this summer and this fall, and I think we're going to be significantly operational by the end of this year.
Any challenges, workforce or otherwise, that you need help with?
Well, there's always the issue of budget, Senator. This is a state-of-the-art facility that is unique, and so when things don't work and you have to get them fixed, or you have to get them repaired, or you have to get them replaced, there's a significant expense because of the level of security that we now have in this facility. But I'm confident that we've got the workforce that is dedicated to the mission, and that we're going to help American agriculture and the country.
In FY24, we appropriated the President's request. We'll work to do so in FY25. Staying a bit on this topic, I recently visited with the Kansas Department of Agriculture, its secretary and staff, the Animal Health Commissioner, the USDA Regional Veterinary Director, and livestock producers throughout Kansas. Mr. Secretary, and what we're talking about is H5N1 and its spread to mammals. Can APHIS, through either its contingency funds or emergency response, work with land-grant and diagnostic labs that have the expertise in livestock management and biodefense to make funds available to research H5N1 that could either treat infected animals or develop the therapies that stop the spread or mutation of the current strain?
I think that work is already underway.
With any success that you could report or challenges you would face?
Well, there are significant challenges from a scientific perspective, but we're going to continue to work on them, and we hope that within 12 to 18 months, we're in a much better place than we are today. It's going to take time. You've got to match the virus. If you're looking at vaccines, you've got to match the vaccine to the virus. You have to make sure that there are markers that can distinguish, especially in poultry, between diseased birds and vaccinated birds. You have trade implications. I mean, it's a pretty complicated question that doesn't lend itself to a 5-minute question and answer period.
I'd be glad to have a long cup of coffee with you.
Sure.
On that topic, and then I'll save my other questions for the next round if there is one. What's the status of scientific study on the H5N1 threat to new mammals, and what are you seeing in trade implications to date?
We've made a concerted effort to reach out to our trading partners, and so far I think there's been an understanding and appreciation for the amount of information we've provided our trade partners. We've seen very little restriction, if you will. A couple of countries expressing concerns, but for the most part, our trading partners understand that we're on top of this, that we expect and anticipate our dairy cows to recover, that our milk is safe, and that it's very, very low risk to people. We're going to continue to do a lot of research on this so that we understand and appreciate the transition and transmission of this. We know that there's heavy virus in the milk. We know that milk, when it's pasteurized, is safe. But there may very well be a circumstance, a situation where we need to be ever vigilant in terms of biosecurity, especially around the milking parlor, in terms of having access to what may be virus-filled milk that in turn can be transitioned. We also have facilities that are both poultry and dairy. We want to make sure that the transport between those two is very carefully thought through, because there can also be biosecurity issues there.
Kansas has become such a dairy state, Mr. Secretary, and thanks to Senator Fisher. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No, and Secretary, please keep all of us up to speed on this issue, because it's something I think single member of the committee is following. We're going to continue the tradition of order of arrival, so we're going to go with Senator Fisher and then Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, it's nice to see you again. In FY24, I was glad to secure $25 million toward USDA's ARS National Center for Resilient and Regenerative Precision Agriculture to be co-located at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. And I'm excited that we will be holding a groundbreaking in a few weeks alongside some of your leadership at USDA. And I look forward to continuing to work with USDA on that facility and to advance that very important technology. I also want to discuss the USDA Meat Animal Research Center at Clay Center, Nebraska. As you know, livestock is the largest segment for agriculture in Nebraska. I was glad to see the budget request included a request for additional employees at U.S. Mark in Clay Center. Your ARS budget request also highlighted some of the important advancements that U.S. Mark has accomplished, such as a development that could protect cattle from BVD, which is estimated to cause annual losses of $1 billion in the United States alone. So, Mr. Secretary, could you discuss how that increased staff at U.S. Mark can help carry out research related to critical livestock industry priorities, including increased environmental sustainability, improved production efficiencies, and optimized use of natural resources?
I think the easiest way for me to answer that question is to suggest that we will approach these challenges in the same way we approach all challenges relative to agriculture, and that is in a cooperative and collaborative way, working not just with the university, but also working with those who are directly impacted and affected by the research. Critically important to any of this is the cooperation of producers, and producers are in the best position to inform us as to where they think priorities should be, and we should be responsive to those priorities. And the research should be driven in part by virtue of those priorities. It should also work in concert with the research that we are independently investing in through our National Institute of Food and Agriculture, as well as the private foundation that was established in a previous Farm Bill, so that we have a comprehensive approach, a coordinated approach, so that we're not basically spending $2 when $1 will do. So I think it's a collaborative approach, it's a cooperative approach, and it's a comprehensive approach.
Have you seen that approach at Clay Center, working with producers in Nebraska?
I have seen that in ARS facilities across the United States. I haven't had the opportunity to specifically visit that particular center, but I would be surprised if that's not the way in which they are approaching their business, because that's the most successful way to do their business.
I have heard very positive things about the center. Obviously, our egg producers, our beef producers are extremely aware of the value that center has, not just for the state of Nebraska, but across this country as well. So I thank you for the interest there. I also believe it's important to maximize the funding that broadband programs are receiving and to get broadband to unserved areas. In order to do that, I think it would make sense that we have one data source that we can rely on about where broadband is and where it is not. Can you share how the USDA tried to promote a more consistent challenge process, comparing what is used by Rural Utility Service versus what is used by the FCC in connection with the National Broadband Map? And has USDA considered measures to improve transparency for challenges by publishing written, reasoned decisions on those challenges?
When we received the resource under the bipartisan infrastructure law, the White House convened the FCC, the Department of Commerce, and the USDA, and expressed a concern for collaboration and cooperation between the three entities. We made the decision that we would try to get our resources out under the Reconnect program as quickly as possible, which we have. We've obligated those resources. We will continue to make announcements through the rest of this year, but roughly 320 projects will be funded. And the location and the scope and the nature of those projects was provided to the FCC and the Department of Commerce, so they in turn could take that into consideration as they made decisions concerning the allocation of a far greater amount of money than that they received. They in turn provide to the states to encourage the states then to make the necessary changes to ensure that we do in fact ultimately have access to decent broadband everywhere in the country.
Right. You know, being able to have that accurate mapping is extremely important, and that, again, takes cooperation, collaboration, not just from providers, but their customers as well, to make sure it is accurate.
You know, I think states were given an opportunity to weigh in, and hopefully governors understood the importance of that, and I'm sure they did.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here. Good to see you again. I first and foremost want to thank you so very much for the work in helping me address the pine beetle disaster in Mississippi. When we had that tremendous drought, it really affected our timber and softwood in Mississippi. And as you know, forest landowners and homeowners across the state have just been devastated by this pine beetle infestations. And due to the problem, Mississippians are facing just enormous economic hardship and risks, such as forest fires and trees falling on their homes, power lines falling on the roads. I mean, it is really significant in our state with this that I don't remember happening in a very long time. But yesterday, the National FSA Office announced the Emergency Forest Restoration Program. The sign-up was beginning, they announced yesterday, for all 82 Mississippi counties. And this was much quicker than we anticipated. And I'm grateful that you made it happen quickly following our conversation of the last Senate Ag Committee hearing just a few weeks ago. It has been very helpful, and I'm relieved that the forest owners will have some access to the funds for costs associated with the commercial thinning, the fire breaks, and the debris removal. I think everybody in my church has a tree down on their house or close to it from attending church and listening to all the concerns, but even driving the interstates throughout the state. It's really effective. But however, there's still a long road ahead of getting Mississippi forest landowners, homeowners, and municipalities back on their feet. And I'm continuing to explore multiple angles to assist them. The Emergency Forest Program authorization is certainly a huge step forward for landowners, and I want to make sure as many eligible Mississippians get help as soon as possible, that they know they're supposed to go sign up, where to go sign up. So I just want to ask you for your commitment to continuing to help me with that and help ensure a smooth sign-up process for my constituents. So many times they'll go to the office and they'll say, it was so complicated or I didn't get the right help. But I'm just asking for your commitment to continue to do that.
Senator, you have that commitment, and I think you can take some credit for the early sign-up and for the fact that we extended the sign-up period. Traditionally 60 days. In this case, it's 120 days.
Thank you so much. We have gotten a lot of calls. Now I'm going to switch to the veterinary medicine loan repayment program. And last year's budget hearings, we discussed this program, an important program that provides awards to help offset the educational loans of veterinarians who agree to serve in USDA-designated rural veterinary shortage areas, which is very critical. I also mentioned the significance withholding tax applied to these awards, which diminishes the effectiveness of the program. You know, we give out these great awards, and then they have to turn around and give so much of it back to us in those taxes. But the exemplary notes accompanying your 2025 budget request for the National Institute of Food and Agriculture proposed legislation to end the withholding tax on these awards. And I truly appreciate your drawing attention to this issue. Would you just, because it's in so many states that this is effective, would you share with the subcommittee how burdensome these withholding tax is and how eliminating it would free more resources for your department to help address the rural veterinary shortage?
Well, it costs roughly $200,000 to get that veterinary degree. And most of the folks who are getting it are not in a position to basically put that kind of cash into their career, so they have to borrow it. So anything that provides help and assistance, or anything that diminishes that help and assistance, obviously, is something we do need to be concerned about. Frankly, the veterinary loan forgiveness program, as good as it is, probably could be better, and with tight budget concerns and considerations, we did the best we could. And one way to make it better is to make sure that it isn't reduced by the tax. And we would hope that we get some direction from all of you that gives us the ability to go to our friends at IRS and essentially say that this shouldn't be a taxable event.
Yeah, well, I certainly appreciate your approach to that, because the shortage in rural areas is so significant, and we're talking our food supply here.
Absolutely.
And we want healthy animals, so thank you so much for that.
I'm going to go back to Senator Moran for his second round.
Thank you for your kind consideration this time. Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Secretary.
I'm so tough on you, Chair.
Mr. Secretary, final rule on WIC program. I'm concerned, I'm pleased, and you've expanded the access to fruits and vegetables, but you have diminished the availability of dairy. Not true?
No, sir.
That's good to know, because we specifically directed, there was an agreement in increasing in the appropriation bill, there was direction in at least report language not to reduce that. So maybe just explain to me what the rule is on WIC.
We did reduce the commitment to fluid milk. And the reason we did is this is a supplemental program. We were basically providing 120% of the average daily milk consumption under the previous WIC rule. So we reduced that down to 78% or so, consistent with the supplemental nature of WIC. Having said that, we also made the packaging for other dairy products like yogurt easier. So the expected anticipation is that more dairy is going to be consumed as a result. In addition, we're seeing an increased number of participants in WIC. So we expect and we project that roughly 130 million more quarts of milk will be sold in the program than previous year. So I think I can make the argument that, in fact, dairy is being assisted, notwithstanding the fact that the percentage of milk may be down a bit. I would also point out that there are a multitude of ways in which this department is assisting the dairy industry. I won't go into them, but I'm happy to give you the infographic that shows billions of dollars of assistance to the dairy industry.
Thank you for your answer. I'll find out what the response to your answer is, and maybe back in touch with you. I think it was last week that NASS, the National Agricultural Statistic Service, announced that it was canceling the July cattle report and discontinuing the cotton objective yield survey. I think that creates some concern among state departments and commodity groups. Is there more information that USDA can make available so that this information is there? Or what kind of look is that, Mr. Secretary?
The problem, Senator, is that budgets have consequences. And when the NASS budget was reduced, there is a consequence. And more importantly, to this particular topic, when it takes 5 or 6 months for the budget to be passed, then the ability and the options available for dealing with a cut in the budget are limited. Limited in this case to the estimates that are future estimates, as opposed to estimates that have occurred in the previous 5 months of the fiscal year. Would encourage adequate funding and encourage earlier decision-making, with all due respect, because it makes it easier. And in addition, it's not just the NASS budget, it's also the fact that none of the pay increases were incorporated in the budget. So NASS and everyone else in USDA had to find the resources to deal with pay increases as well. So it's a complicated
cost-saving measure, and in part, but it's also lack of information, timely information to create the statistic that's needed.
Well, I understand, but
No, I'm just reiterating what you told me to make sure I understand. That true?
That's correct.
Yeah. Well, I certainly wouldn't defend the timeliness of Congress.
That would be hard to do.
It would be hard to do, and I wouldn't try it. I can assure you that the people that you've been visiting with this morning in this room share that view, that we ought to get our work done on time. I think my last question, Mr. Chairman, this is a narrow issue but has consequences. In my meeting with conservation district leaders, the conversation turned to they were contracting for employees to do NRCS work. Contract employees who operate NRCS vehicles and act within their scope of NRCS contract duties. It has been determined that non-federal partner employees like those are not covered by the Federal Tort Claims Act. And therefore, it's harder to find the folks who are willing to take the risk to drive the NRCS vehicles and not have insurance coverage to do so. Is there a plan for fixing, or is this another one that you can put the responsibility that we need to amend the Tort Claims Act?
I'd ask for the opportunity to ask our general counsel's office about that particular issue so that I give you an accurate response. We'll get a response to you in the next couple of days, if that's soon enough.
I didn't necessarily expect, although it wouldn't surprise me if you knew this topic, but I wanted to raise it because the challenges of finding employees in NRCS, it's become...
It's a fair question, and we ought to have an answer to it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Senator Manchin.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary, thank you for being here. Appreciate all your hard work. Last year, I had the privilege, truly, and you and I have had a relationship and been friends for a long time, but collaborating with you and watching how you and your team worked, it was unbelievable. Coming to the aid of apple growers throughout the Mountain State, we had a heck of a problem. Together, we facilitated the successful harvest of our apple crop after unprecedented oversupply. Issues threatened the livelihoods of farms. Bad weather left a significant share of apples cosmetically unsuitable for the fresh market in just a few short weeks. Our teams working together, hand in hand, to establish a brand new emergency apple buyback program, which worked tremendously, saving tens of millions of apples from rotting in the fields. Salvaged apples were then donated to charitable organizations and food banks, not only in West Virginia but nationwide. So I want to express my gratitude for your staff and, most importantly, yourself for taking the initiative and lead on this. However, oversupply challenges in the apple industry are widespread, affecting growers nationwide. Maybe you can share the USDA's strategy for achieving a sustainable long-term solution to this issue. It doesn't seem like it's going to go away.
Normally, we have sufficient resources within Section 32 and perhaps the Commodity Credit Corporation to address surpluses of commodities, which is the traditional way. However, this year, for whatever reason, there seems to be a lot of surpluses of a lot of commodities. In fact, we have probably $2 billion of need compared to roughly $1 billion of resource. So to the extent that we could get, either additional resources within Section 32 or maintain the flexibility that we utilize to solve these problems from time to time through the CCC, those are the most effective and efficient ways. I think we're hopeful that with some of the other work that we're doing with the school meal rule, with the WIC, and more consumption of fruits and vegetables, that we'll see over time a diminishment of those surpluses. But in the meantime, we'll continue to use the tools we have as long as there's no interference with those tools.
Great. Also, Mr. Secretary, the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in unprecedented nationwide shutdown, resulting in prolonged office closures and significant disruptions in the labor market, leading to millions of job vacancies across the nation. In your written testimony, you highlighted staffing challenges at the USDA, particularly within the USDA Office of Rural Development. You've noted a concerning trend where the portfolio has expanded by 85%, yet staffing levels have declined by 30%. As a senator representing a predominantly rural state, that's going to be troubling for all of us, especially in our states. But so, can the Department of Agriculture, can you believe with the staffing you have, or the reduction you've had with the demand you're having for services, can you meet the challenges, and what can we do to help?
Well, Senator, we're going to meet the challenge as best we can because the people who work for USDA are incredibly committed. and are hard workers, and they are people that actually risk their mental health to get the job done. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with folks who work for USDA who basically talk about the stress and strain of working not one job, but oftentimes two jobs or 2.5 jobs. So to the extent that you can provide, that you can right-size programs with people, that would help. To the extent that you can provide resources to adequately enable RD to hire additional people. There was a period of time where they were under a freeze for a period of time. That made it more difficult. And also to recognize that we, like is the case in many other areas of agriculture, we have an aging workforce and we have significant retirements. So giving us the tools to be able to retain good people or to attract new people with recruitment tools.
How is the recruitment going as far as in rural areas especially?
Well, the problem is, this is a much bigger problem, Senator. Your federal pay scale, it used to be the best job in a rural place in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, my home state, Iowa, where I now live, but it's not necessarily the best job today. So there needs to be a discussion here about, are we serious about federal employment? If we are, we need to take a look at the pay structure and system so that it's more competitive.
How many, and this is across the whole spectrum, but as far as in USDA, how many are still working from home or remote, and how many are back in? What percentage is back into the office?
It's the best way I can describe this is roughly 82% of our workforce is sort of on the job where the job needs to be done. Now, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily...
Is that the same as it was before the pandemic? I mean, they're back to where they were working? And
I would say for the most part. Okay. Not in every mission area, but for the most part, collaboratively or comprehensively. The work is getting, I can guarantee you the work is getting done, and I can give you chapter and verse of how many loans we've done and compare that to where it was before the pandemic. We are cranking out the work. There's no question about that.
Let me just say one thing. I get more compliments working with your office than I do with almost any agencies in the federal government because it's a rural state. We are so interacting with you all the time. So I just want to thank you and all your staff here. They've done a great job, and we're very appreciative.
That may be because you have my cell number.
That may be because we both know where we both live. Thank you, sir.
Secretary, first off, I want to recognize the inherent challenges that exist to expanding tribal self-determination within different parts of your department. But I would just ask that you commit to working closely with me and my colleagues this year to determine what is needed for USDA to expand tribal self-determination opportunities, including through 638 contracting authority.
Senator, we are more than happy to work with you and more importantly, or as importantly, with the tribes. I mentioned the consultations that are going to take place. They are in nutrition, they are in forestry, they are in food safety in an effort to try to figure out how to structure the self-determination that fits the mission of USDA. We're a little different than the Department of Interior because many of the programs that the Interior Department have are expressly and confined to tribal areas and tribal nations. Our programs bleed over into non-tribal areas, so it's important for us to make sure that we are aligning it appropriately, but we are very committed to this, as I think expressed by the fact that we have over 160 co-stewardship arrangements on the Forest Service. That's a good example. The work that we've done in the food distribution program, another example.
Yeah, we, and you've been very good about visiting New Mexico. If you ever want to see a 638 contract that's been very successful, the Pueblo Santa Clara's 638 contract with USDA has been a real success. I'm going to turn things back over to the ranking member for his final questions, and then I think we'll probably wrap up.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. CCC, incredibly important because it's a flexible tool that we use for a lot of different purposes, as you know. And I believe it's something that needs to be there because we never know what's going to happen in this, again, this huge, diverse world of agriculture. And so I think how we use it really matters. There's a number of things that we've used it for recently, going back to the drought issue that 2021, for example, my state was included. And there's about 5.5 billion right there, right now, that we've designated for some of these different uses. Some you like better, some I like better. But again, a number of, or a variety of things that I think are really important. So again, my first point is that CCC is an important tool. We need to be able to use it. We need to have flexibility. And I think you and I both agree, the Ag Secretary needs some ability, hopefully working closely with us to utilize that tool and have it for the future. But also, where are you in terms of getting some of the current programs dispersed that we have utilized CCC funding for?
Several of those areas, I'll take the fertilizer area, for example. There's an opportunity for us to do significantly more projects, but we have to go through the environmental review. Oftentimes, there's a process by which, before we can make an award or finalize an award, we have to go through the NEPA process. That takes time, it takes staff, it takes resources, which we have. We've done 42 projects, but I anticipate that we would probably see another 50 projects in that space. So that's ongoing. There are ways in which we're working on the drought issue, specifically with our sister agencies, to determine whether or not there's an interesting collaborative that could potentially be between the Department of Interior and USDA in terms of those resources, that we're trying to work through the OGCs of the two departments. There are HPAI, those ongoing expenses continue to accrue, and we continue to pay them out. The Climate Smart Agriculture Initiative was structured at the request of farmers and ranchers and 80 different organizations to be a 3 to 5 year commitment, so those resources will go out over a period of time. So it's a question of the structure of the storage request that Senator McConnell requested. Well, it turned out that there was quite a bit of demand for that, to the point that it far exceeded the amount of money that we had allocated. So we're taking a step back and trying to figure out how to restructure that program to provide the assistance for the folks who actually need it immediately, and an additional, maybe modified approach for those who are confronted with a slightly different risk. I mean, so it depends on the specific item within CCC, but it's not for lack of effort. We're not sitting on the resources. Every single one of those is being advanced. And if you look at the resources that have been invested, I think you'll find that there's been significant activity in that account, in all of those accounts.
Well, and I think that's an example of a program where you and I both recognize that creates an opportunity for us to work together to do some important things between farm bills. And so I think we need to make sure that we continue to work together to ensure we have it, because there's some that seem to want to take it away.
No, that's right.
And it's got to be collaborative, right? It's got to be a working relationship.
Absolutely, and I think, frankly, if we could be a bit more creative about the structure of the Farm Bill, that this is a vehicle, as we did with ARC and PLC and CRP, that essentially provides the resources for funding of those programs. And the commitment I'd make to you, Senator, is that we will never, ever, ever drain the account. We'll never just, for one thing, as has happened in the past, drain the account and force you to replenish it. We are very sensitive to the importance of maintaining some set of fiscal responsibility in the utilization of those tools.
That's good. There's two other questions I want to try to get here. I know you addressed some of the avian flu stuff, which is obviously very important. But one is on advancing some of these new initiatives on precision ag like we have in our state. We have this great partnership between North Dakota State University, Grand Farm, and ARS. I think that this is just a huge benefit for farmers in terms of precision ag, which is such a big deal. I want you to address how we can do more there. And then I do want to come back and ask you, we're getting budget pressure from things like WIC, where we saw a $1 billion increase this past year and another $700 million increase this year. So we don't want our ag research and some of these new initiatives so vital to farmers crowded out of this budget. So if you could kind of address those two in the time we have remaining.
Well, the answer to the first question is continue to be supportive of and increase the funding for research, education, and extension. Every year, we ask for significant increases in those, in REE, and every year, we get a significant amount, but often less than what we were asking for. So that's the answer to that question. The answer to your question is, I think eventually, you all are going to have to confront the notion that this is a program that is very difficult to, with specific accuracy, to define precisely how many people will use it from day to day, week to week, month to month. It is very similar in that vein as the SNAP program. The SNAP program is a mandatory program. WIC should be a mandatory program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just my closing comments, to hand it back to you then, would be, again, appreciate your work on all of these things. I kind of laid out how important I think it is in terms of when we talk farm policy, it affects everybody in the country. So, again, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Ranking Member Hoven, and I want to thank the Secretary and Mr. Nelson for being here today. This has been a great hearing. Questions for the record are due by next Tuesday, April 23rd, and we would appreciate responses back from USDA within 30 days if you can. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.